I always tell the family, but by the time it gets to me, it's usually right before they go over the cliff, because I'm literally standing on the cliff going with the net going, okay, we're trying to catch this guy before he goes over.
The whole concept for MOVE is make a difference. O, to offer up your time, talent, and gifts. And B, there's victory in the small things, and E, to encourage others. And so I started to move.
Hello, everybody, and thank you again for tuning in to the MOVE podcast. I'm Scotty Carlisle, your host, and today, buckle up and get prepared. This is going to be an interesting one. So today, my guest, Bobby Newman, has some insight and experience in dealing with something that a lot of us have to face at some point in our life, and that is addiction. So Bobby, could you give me a little bit of a backstory on who you are and where you came from?
Okay, yeah, I could definitely do that. I came from a very small town in southern Oklahoma. And when I say small town, a lot of people will tell me small town and they'll say, oh yeah, it only had, 3,500 or 4,500 people. And I'd say small town when it had 648 people.
Oh, that's another level. Yeah.
Small town. It had 648 people and about 13 churches. So, I grew up in the, it was the 70s and early 80s when I graduated high school, which I'm telling you how old I am, but that's okay. But, when drugs, there were some people at the time that were using drugs, but not many. But alcohol was pretty prevalent. There were, there were a bigger majority of kids drinking alcohol, and I got into drinking alcohol. I really love sports and loved, football, basketball. I went and enjoyed some winning seasons in my high school years, and went on to college to experience college football.
So real fast, on Friday nights, was it a thing where everybody would, get their six pack and then cruise on Main Street?
Oh yeah. That was the big deal up and down Main Street. I put about 50 miles on my dad's car one night, and I never left town. And it's only like a mile square.
Yep, I can relate. That's funny.
Yeah. So that was, actually, claim to fame is the movie Footloose was based off of events that happened in my hometown in 1980.
Oh wow. What's the hometown again?
Elmore City, Oklahoma.
Elmore City.
Yeah. So, and so with that being said, there was a ban on dancing, but drug use wasn't that prevalent. And I always told my kids that drug education back in those days was, if you do drugs, you're going to die, or you do drugs. In the early 70s, when I was in like grade school and, elementary school, there were some kids, LSD was a big deal. And there were some kids that got into LSD and they had done some brain damage, and it was very evident. And my parents always said, if you do drugs, you're going to end up like Mark or Billy. And
you're going to think you're an orange for the rest of your life.
Yeah. So anyway, as I was growing up, again, I was, we enjoyed sports and winning seasons and things like that. It was relatively good. And I had no interest in really doing anything, I did start drinking and heavily. But as I got older, I kind of got bored with things, especially towards the end of my senior year when sports was over and kind of coming on to the end of the senior year. And I really didn't know what I was going to do with my life. I wasn't sure if I was going to college or not. I did want to go play college ball, but I wasn't quite sure. And, so I got into smoking marijuana. Then I did go play college ball, and I got introduced to, I was drinking and smoking weed now. And then I got into, I introduced to amphetamines. And one of the players who used to bring in a prescription drug in a capsule. And I could take that, like we would go out on, college night was Thursday night, and we would go out drinking. And so drinking, and then I'd take half of that capsule, and I could stay up most of the night.
Was that a White Cross, or what was it? What was it called?
I don't know. I mean, it was like a capsule. I can remember it was a fairly good sized capsule, and I would always pull it apart and dump some of the powder out. And I would take, either drink the powder or, eat the powder or whatever. And I thought, man, I can remember it just making me feel. And then the next day I would take it before practice and for football practice, and I would be like, man, I said, where'd this stuff come from? And so
Get in front of me,
I was like, well, I wished I'd had this in high school, because you just, and then I got to where I was doing that on Thursday and Friday, and then I would do it on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, and then it just kind of, I went from there, and it gradually, my substance abuse got worse, but I still would try to do things. I ended up, I didn't complete college. I dropped out of college after a year because I really wasn't applying myself, but then I went on into trade school and completed a 4-year trade school. And, I ended up, I would seem like I would be trying to do well and succeed in life and get where I wanted, but I was still abusing substances. So, you roll that back, and I had my fair share of trouble. I was a pretty rowdy guy, and I would get in trouble with, all partying and all that entailed with, driving, and, sometimes there would be some, fisticuffs, and there would be situations that would happen, and, and I didn't consider myself to be necessarily a bad person, but I did have, if you looked at me on a piece of paper, it probably didn't look, that good. But anyway, by the time I'm 35 years old, I'm looking at, I'm in a lot of trouble, and I was looking at some prison time, and I still wasn't, even when I was in, one time in my life, I had 4 attorneys for 4 different things in 2 states.
Oh, wow.
And
that's,
yeah.
Okay, so you definitely did not lead a boring life, and especially in that time.
It was, there was always something going on, always something. And
all of that basically stemmed from using whatever it was that you were using at the time. Is that the moral of the story here? Is that where we're?
I know I gave you a long answer, but I come from a small town, and nobody ever ends up, thinking they're going to end up being in a situation like I was in. I was just a kid trying to have fun, like to have fun, and things didn't end up that way. So.
Yeah, it's I like that quote. It says, "Easy choices, hard life. Hard choices, easy life," right? So I think we all experiment and test the limits of our situation by doing that. But so at what point did you decide to maneuver into the industry where you're like, you know what, I'm going to help people that are dealing with these kind of issues?
I went through a rehab program over 20 years ago. And there was a guy that showed up at the center that was doing drug education. And it was a very fun presentation. It was basically just told a really fun way of explaining how a person becomes addicted. And I was like, man, that's information that most people don't have.
So like what did it do? So give me an example of how that's a fun, I'm just curious.
Well, I'll give you an example of how drugs are considered toxins. Obviously drugs are toxic, right? But nobody ever considers drugs as toxins, and how does the body process those toxins?
They don't make the connection. They just think high, cool things I see, but they don't make it the connection as this is a poison or a toxin. That makes sense.
Yeah, this is a toxin, and this is the way your body processes toxins. So a lot of times people will say, just because you do drugs, you're going to be an addict. Well, that's not true. You tell somebody this is what happens and how it physically affects your body and how your body metabolizes drugs, and it also burns up nutrients. It burns up specific nutrients, which contribute to depression. And you don't get into all the really heavy scientific terms. You just keep it really light. You explain to them, your liver and kidneys have to process this toxin. And when it distributes it back into the body to be dispelled through the urine or through, the sweat, some of those toxins actually stay behind. And they continue to burn up vitamins. They cause you to feel worse, and which causes you to have to take more drugs to feel the same effect. I mean, so anyway, it breaks it down to where you're like, oh wow, I didn't think of it like that. You know, I thought that I would just be able to do this, and then one day I'd be able to stop. And you know, and some people can, but not very. You know, the percentages of those people are not that great. So
Yeah, that's
anyway.
it's a slippery slope, and you don't know. And some people definitely have addictive personalities.
Yeah.
Now, okay, and how long have you been helping people with addiction issues?
So over 20 years, I started out doing in the very beginning of 2001. Started helping people get out. You know, I started working and training to be a drug education specialist, and then I helped to set up a drug education program. And at that time, my thing was to go out and educate kids, and then it just kind of gradually moved into other responsibilities through at working at a treatment center, and then got into where I was doing not only the drug education, but I was also doing graduate aftercare, and then I was also doing part of the admissions process, and from there it led me into being an interventionist because I started working with interventionists at that point.
So, when you say interventionist, I know that there's a show that came out and intervention and where is it something like that or is it different?
No, it's pretty similar to that. I mean, that would give somebody a good idea of what an intervention is. That's, of course, a little bit dramatized for the, you know, I wouldn't say that those guys had bad intentions. I actually think that they've shed the light on a lot of things that with families that could be done. People sit back and they have a loved one struggling and they don't know what to do. And that's definitely, it shows them that something can be done. But there's certain things as far as an interventionist will tweak or do things differently than what they might do on the show that would be a little bit more effective. So,
And how long have you been focused on the intervention part? That's been 20 years?
I've been doing the first intervention I did was in 2001, actually later 2001, but I didn't really focus in on interventions until about 2006. You know, and then I worked with a lot of interventionists before then, but didn't actually go out and do them myself.
So give me an example of an intervention of, you know, something that comes to mind.
Well, like,
or maybe a past experience.
What? Say that again. I'm sorry.
Like some kind of past experience, or you know how it started and then how it ended up.
I have got so many stories. I mean, you know, I just want to mention as an intervention happens in many ways, right? There's going to be, you know, and most of them we don't have any control over. You know, a loss of a job, or that's a form of an intervention. A loss of a job, or trouble with your marriage, or DUI, or you know, a possession charge, or all those are little things that are trying to stop you from continuing to do the destructive behavior. Nobody really pays any attention to those. A lot of times they'll ignore them and go, oh, well, it was because of this, or oh, it was because of that. They never associate it with the actual substance abuse. But an intervention, you know, I've got interventions that there's certain elements of the situation that make an intervention successful. And and a lot of times families will call me and they'll say, I don't think we can help my son. We try to talk to him, and I ask them 3 questions. I say, you know, there's 3 things that make it successful. And sometimes you don't have those 3 things, right? Sometimes you just have to do the best you can. Like I've gone in and gotten people off the street before that, you know, one kid was in Phoenix that the family hadn't even seen him in 2 years. Wow. And they didn't, you know, but they knew where he was at. They had gotten him a phone, and they knew what street he was on, and he was homeless. So I was able to go out there, and it took me a couple of days to find him. And then it took me a couple more days to convince him to get help. But fortunately, he had gotten arrested and he was an opiate addict. So when he was in jail,
yeah, you had his undivided attention.
Yeah, he was like, he got thrown in jail. I mean, I sat down with him and was talking to him, and you know, he broke down, and you know, I said, your grandmother sent me out here. She's concerned. She wants you to bring you back and, you know, get you some help. And do you want help? Do you want to change? And he did. He did, but he was still, you know, heavily addicted to heroin.
I would imagine that's the first one, right? Do they want help?
Yeah. Yeah.
What other things?
Yeah. Do they want to change their life? And 2 are the threat. Like, let's say that you have somebody who just absolutely is just wreaking havoc on the family, right? And they're, they're refused to get help. And so you have that element of, like, let's say, as another example, that the husband has been going to the bar every night, and the wife's home with the kids, and she's like, if you don't stop going to the bar every night, I'm gonna leave. I'm not, this is it. Well, then he keeps going, and then she finally gets fed up and packs up her bags and says, I'm out of here. When he comes home, and he doesn't want to lose his wife, he loves his kids, he wants to keep his family together, so he says, hey, I'll change my ways, because he now sees that she means business. So that relationship is going to go away. So it's the threat of a loss of a loved one, right? Like kids are going to, the inherent desire to change doesn't necessarily mean the person is willing to go to rehab. It just means that they don't like their life, they're not happy, and they want to change. Well, they don't know how, and a lot of times they can't see how rehab is going to go help them. Rehab, in this instance, or actually getting help, as an admission of failure to a lot of people, right? They can't see it as an opportunity,
Right.
But then, so you have that one element, they want to change. Two is the threat of a loss of a loved one's affection or love, right? Or the third thing is what we call environmental pressure, meaning those things in the environment that are causing you to have to make a decision to change. Like for me, for instance, I was looking at going to prison for a long time, and I thought, I'm going to take the lesser of the options here, and I'm going to go over here. But I got really close to going, but I'm not a felon or anything, thankfully. But it did take a lot of pressure to get me to go into, and that pressure a lot of times is not what families are able to do. I'll give you an example of a girl that I had up in, she was in Catskill, New York. I think that's where, anyway, upstate New York. And she had a little 7-year-old girl. She was addicted to heroin, and the grandmother was raising the little girl. And, this girl walks away from her 7-year-old, who's begging her, send her mom a little video. We didn't, of course, have the little 7-year-old at the intervention, but once she figured out what we were doing, she wanted to say something to her mom. She said, "Mom, I love you. I want you to be in my life. Please, just the tearjerker of a video that she made for her mother." And we sent it to the mother, and there was no response. And and if you can't, for me, if that doesn't motivate somebody to change, then I don't know. The only other thing else is going to motivate them to change is, incarceration, or some really severe, thing. And so.
Well, I think it's something to be mentioned that when somebody is addicted, it's basically a reprioritization of their life, right? Their family or their loved ones, or the desire to have good things and nice things is subordinated to the desire for immediate gratification. And when you're giving somebody the opportunity, if you frame it that way, it just doesn't, they don't care. So it's like somebody's in the market for a motorcycle, and you're trying to sell them a Toyota Tacoma. They just don't care. You can have the nicest Tacoma with the best price and everything, but it's just not connecting. So it's interesting. You have to, I guess, threaten the loss of a loved one, because I think that has the strongest bond or connection, where people don't like losing things. The opportunity of getting something new or having something better doesn't necessarily motivate somebody as much as the stick, the carrot or the stick. In people that are addicted, I guess it seems that the carrot doesn't really hold much weight, but the stick has to be a big, strong stick, because and then you start getting into something else, because even if they have the threat of a loss of a loved one, they get that loved one, right? And then they're back in the cycle. And then they're like, okay, well, now I have the loved one. Now we're here. Everything's going good again. I can do this just a little bit because, just a little bit, and they're still going to be here. So I'm not going to lose them. I just going to dabble, and then boom, now they're back to square zero. And so how often does that happen?
It happens a lot. And, the guys will say, oh, well, you can drug test me, or you can do this, or I'll go do this, and everybody else. And, the idea is to get them to see that, look, you're asking all these other people to manage your addiction. You're asking all these other people to step up to the plate to solve your problem. And they're willing to help you because they're willing to do whatever they need to do to get you to go get help. But you now have to make a commitment to go get help and do this to yourself because, I don't want them to, it's like, it's this weird viewpoint that they can't see, which I could look back at when I was in it. I could see how they could think that, not to say that they're any different or bad people just because they think this, but we have to shift their viewpoint to the point of getting them to see that they are the ones that have to now step up to the plate here. This is a goal. Usually when we do an intervention, we have everything laid out for them. We take every single problem that they may be facing, like maybe they've got bills to pay, or maybe they have child support, or maybe they've got legal things, or whatever. We and I go over that with the family. Okay, what are the reasons he's going to tell us that he can't go? Well, he's got to pay his child support, or he's got to pay his house payment, or he's got to pay his rent, or he's got his stuff in his house, or he's got this. Okay, we got to handle all that for him. If we're really going to do this, we have to be, we really have. So,
and then the family has to step up. Somebody has to come up with the money for the rent, or whatever it is.
Yeah, they have to be willing to do that, is because they we're asking, well, he should take care of that himself. Well, that's a little bit of a tall order, because we actually have, you're asking a guy to now go to rehab and then plus worry about all these other problems. It's a big deal. We've got to take it. And most families will do that. They'll say, you know what, whatever. But we just got it. So when we do the intervention and they say, oh, I can't go, well, because of this, and this. And, we usually have most of the things, if not all of them, thought out ahead of time, and a solution for those things before they ever tell us. We thought of that, Bill, we thought of that. Glad you said that, because we actually have a solution. Your Uncle Jake is going to come in, cover your rent, but it's usually because the family's usually been helping them then anyway. We're going to help you. Go ahead.
Well, I finished that because I had a question regarding, does it ever happen when, let's say, a mom comes to you and says, we need an intervention, but when you look at the scenario, let's say it's a son or a daughter, and they don't really have bad addictions. Maybe they do smoke weed, and it's not necessarily affecting their life. Maybe they're very functional in what they do, and you have to look at it and you say, well, I don't know, ma'am, maybe it's not as bad as you think. Or does that ever happen? Or is it usually by the time it gets to you, it's already so bad that you have to do, some serious, I guess, maneuvering?
Well, no, it's usually by then, but I always tell the family, but by the time it gets to me, it's usually right before they go over the cliff, because I'm literally standing on the cliff going with the net going, okay, we're trying to catch this guy before he goes over. But my mantra is that it's never too soon to do an intervention. It's always too late. Wow. Right? And I'll give you my son, who's 29 and doing fabulous in life. He just got married, lives in Miami, driving around down there selling insurance and with a sports car, doing great. But when he was a teenager, he started going down the wrong path. I had no evidence of him using drugs at all. I just knew he was making some bad decisions, and I knew how it was going to end up. And his mother and her father and her family were like trying to handle him. And I told him, I said, I got some solutions, but they wanted to try to figure it out their way, which I don't blame them. They had, their solutions weren't bad. It just weren't working. And so they finally turned it over to me, but we did an intervention on the kid and found out later, after he went to a rehab program, that he had been using, but it was more about getting his life back, not about drugs. It was just about, a refocusing where he wanted to go with his life. And it was the greatest thing that ever happened to him but he admitted later, he said he had used drugs maybe 6 times over about a 18-month period, which, it's not nothing to be sneezed at, but at the same time, it's not like he's sticking a needle in his arm every day. So, but he was really making some bad decisions. And so we did an intervention on him. And so, but it saved us. I mean, that probably could have went on 10 years and he was headed for incarceration. He just was. And so I thought, I'm going to save everybody some trouble, including him. And he was able to get it squared away and go back and finish high school, enjoy his high school football, sophomore, junior, senior year, and went on to college. And had we not done that, those years would have been wasted. So,
well, let me ask you, when it comes to situations, I would imagine one of your biggest challenges is the concept of avoidance. I'm not addicted. I don't have a problem. This is fine. I can handle this. No, my life, and you look back from an objective seat and you say, wow, man, that's messed up. That's messed up. That's not good.
Yeah.
Dude, you do have a problem.
Mm-hmm.
How do you address avoidance? And what is your concept of avoidance?
Nobody ever thinks. My concept, I look back and I told you about those times when in my life I had the 4 attorneys for 4 different things.
Yeah.
I would have told you then I don't have a substance use. I would have told you then, no, I got this. No big deal. At the time, I could have stopped using drugs long enough to pass a drug test if I needed to, if I knew one was coming, or if I had for work or probation or whatever. So I would have told you that. And it was insane. I look back at that time in my life and I'm like, it was obvious I had a huge problem, but, as far as talking to people, I used to go in the beginning and I would go in and they'd try to downplay or minimize their substance abuse. And I would say, and I would try to really focus in on this is how bad it is. But I've learned through watching others and things that it's just better to say, you know what? Yeah, well, why do we want to wait? Oh, I'm not as bad as they always compare it to the guy out on the streets that's shooting, homeless and living under a bridge that's, doing 10 bags of heroin a day or 15 or whatever. And I'm like, yeah, well, we don't want it to get to that point. That's why we're doing this now. But yeah, I understand. You're right. You're not as bad as those guys. But why do we want to wait? Oh, I can stop at any time. Well, you just OD'd 3 weeks ago. I did an intervention on a guy that was over in Colorado just 10 days ago. And he's going into rehab today, by the way. But he has a job. He had his own house. He's got equity in his house. He's got cash in the bank, but he's got he had on 3 different types of prescription drugs. Plus he was getting fentanyl off the street, and so he went in there and told his mother, he said, can you go up there and clean up my room a little bit? So she comes over to visit us, and she's in town from Atlanta. And she goes in there and finds 50 fentanyl pills in his nightstand. And I'm like, dude, I said, come on. I said, that's a glaring sign right there that you need some help. Either A, you wanted your mom to find them, or you're so out of touch that you forgot that they were in there, which is another indicator that, and he, I said, you're a smart guy. I mean, I'm not gonna, you're smart enough to figure this out. So, anyway, he agreed. He had finally, after about a day, he said, you know what, you're right. There's no sense. And I said, it's especially addicted to opiates like you are. I mean, why make it harder on yourself to say, oh, I'm going to do this on your own, when opiates are physically the hardest drug to come off of on your own. So why not go in somewhere and get some help? And he said, he agreed. And he said it, which I never do, which is not a good idea, when they say, oh, I'll go next week.
Never do today what can be put off till tomorrow, man.
Exactly, especially but he's actually going in today, so he's one of the rare moments of it being a success. but he was smart enough to realize that it was, and we were able to do a good job of seeing it, getting him to see that this is an opportunity.
So, okay, now, and how I see that, I think that's great, and it's on the road to recovery, right? So, and the road to recovery is not a one stoplight journey. You know, I have experienced basically all growing up. So my dad had fell off a 3.5-story building. He was 22, and he was a avid sports guy. He was a boxer. He was a runner. He was a fighter. He did all this active stuff, and he was in construction. Fell off a 3.5-story building. Said he would never walk again, on crutches. You know, lots of pain. I had an artificial hip, crushed his spleen, broke a bunch of bones, and completely changed his life. Now, not only were there physiological impediments in every corner of his life, but also psychological, because now you've taken away my manhood. I can't be a man because men do this, and now I can't, so therefore I am not a man. Plus, you know, and you have people that are dealing with these kind of scenarios and they talk to their doctor, and their doctor's like, you know, there's not a lot we can do, but we can take away the pain with this, introduce opiates or introduce whatever the hell else they have. And that becomes an addiction, not only to take away the pain, but also to take away the thoughts, the numbness, the, you know, because that's very, it bites, you know, it's very clear. It's very, you know, pungent. It's hard. And so you have somebody that has been taking prescription drugs, and they say, oh shit, you know, I've realized now I'm taking 3 when I should only be taking 1, and I'm doing it 5 times a day instead of twice. And that's probably not good. And I'm a little bit lethargic, and I don't have energy. And, you know, then we have the wife, and then the jobs, and all of these things start to compound, and they say, oh man, this sucks. So, but my question is, now they're going to rehab. Okay. So that's the first step, I think, on the road to recovery. How do you deal with scenarios where somebody is in physical pain and they have some way of reducing that pain? How do you deal with them? How do you help them not fall back? Because it's like their whole life is on the edge. They're not like, you know, when somebody notices that they are addicted and they say, you know what, I'm not doing that cocaine anymore. They can cut off the ties, they can separate themselves, and they can come back into the dry land. But when you have people that are dealing with these type of scenarios and they're prescribed, they don't have that luxury. They have to literally stay on the edge. And how do you have a way of dealing with those people, helping them?
Well, education is the key, and it definitely, those are like, there's a lot of folks that come through, you know, they start taking drugs to handle some sort of problem, right? A physical problem, such as your dad, or mental emotional trauma that they've experienced, you know, and those drugs are the solution to that problem, and then they themselves become the problem. And particularly when it comes to that type of thing with opiates, you know, some things that I've learned over the years, which I didn't know, is that, you know, opiates will actually cause pain.
Because it reduces your pain threshold, because you're getting, yeah, I totally agree.
Well, there's a yeah, and you've always been, and the more a person takes, the more it numbs them out, and then, you know, it actually causes, and there's something a lot of people don't know, is that you know, towards the end of your nerves, you know, where they communicate with each other, the nerves endings, it causes swelling, inflammation. It's called gliopathy, right? And it causes this swelling. So when you stop taking the cessation of the drug stops, and it stops the numbness that's created by the drug, right? But that swelling is still there. So the pain is worse than it normally would be.
Interesting.
So, and there's also opiates burn up. Doesn't mean that there's not legitimate pain. That does not mean, people that have been injured could have legitimate pain, but they also have, an addict. There's a couple of other things that they don't bother to tell people that I know of. Maybe they do and I don't know it, but an addict will have a usually terrible diet and they crave a lot of sugar, right? So not only do you have the drug itself causing inflammation, you have usually take the ingestion of a lot of sugar because the body craves it, and that's also an inflammatory, right? And they're also not doing the things that, or they may not be doing the things that are required to actually reduce inflammation as far as some sort of physical therapy or whatever, right? So there's a number of things that could be going on behind the scenes that are contributing to the problem that people may not be aware of, to where they could then go off of the hardcore, opiates or the painkillers, right? So that would be one thing. And but then you have to actually solve, if there's a constant pain problem, that's a signal that there's something wrong. So I would be, still, I'm, I still live in it. I like to be active and stuff, and I still live, there's certain discomforts that I have just being older that I don't like, but, I still, I have to just deal with it and kind of grit my teeth and go on. But that doesn't mean that, like, let's say somebody again, like, like your dad had injury. But there could be things that it could be done that weren't so, would reduce the pain to the point of where he wouldn't require that type of medical care, from a drug.
Well, what I found is that he would come to a realization of, oh shit, I don't like this. What's going on with my life? And he would say, you know what? I'm going to stop. I'm only going to take what I need to only when I have pain, right? And so it's like we're all bipolar. And the person that is sober, that has clarity, even though they're experiencing pain, can look and see and make judgments and say, okay, you know what? This is what I need to do, and I can see that.
Yeah.
But the problem comes in not at that point. The problem comes in after they've taken the one pill, right? Now that they're just getting the one dose, I'm not going to take too much. I'm only going to take one. And then at that point, their judgment starts to get a little bit more cloudy. They're more open to, whims. I guess at that point, and then it's like, you know what, screw it, I'm going to take another one. So in essence, when you're dealing with somebody that is sober and you're doing an intervention, everything that you say could make 100% sense to that person, and they are 100% on board, and it's going to happen. But that's not the person that you have to be talking to. You have to be talking to the one that is a little high, because that's the person that's going to make the bad choice, in those situations.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, that goes on. One of the things that I try to do with everybody is explain to them that it's not when you're tempted or if you're tempted, it's when you're tempted, because you move everything away from you that's going to, like going into a program, it's going to reduce your chances of relapse, because you now have moved those temptations away. As soon as you move out of that protected environment, those temptations are going to come swarming in, even unintentionally. And, you have to be prepared mentally to figure out with a plan on how you're going to handle it. And for me, the way it worked for me, was I had just decided, I said, I'm done. I mean, I had a point, I was in there almost 4 months, because I had probation that was about the same length of time. And so I wasn't in any hurry. I was like, I'm just going to park it here till my probation's over. And so I wasn't in any hurry, but I was there probably 2 months before I had that epiphany of like, I'm done. I am not going back. I turned the corner and I was like, I looked back and I was like, I'm never going back there. In my mind, I knew. And so when those things inadvertently came at me, opportunities to drink. I mean, I was flying to see my sister after I just got out of rehab and had a layover in St. Louis. and an ice storm came in. So it grounded the plane. So I had to stay in a hotel that night. My sister puts me up in a hotel, puts me on a Black Diamond, some sort of credit card, that unlimited expense. And of course, they ushered me right into the bar and grill when I got there. And I'm like, you've got free access to the bar. And I'm like, I just want a cheeseburger. And I went to my sister, I called her up. I said, thanks for the free access to the bar. And anyway, she got mad. I told them not to do that. I'm like, yeah, well, anyway. But that could have been my first. I'm just like trying to get to visit my family, and here I am being ushered into full access to, a bar,
You can have whatever you like.
You go shot. We got it all right here. And but I was done. I was like, I don't want, and then, as soon as I got back home, I had an old girlfriend show up, and, she's still out using. And so those things happen. But I was just like, no, I didn't even have a plan. But for me, I had decided I'm done. I'm not going back to that lifestyle. So anything that comes along that's a threat to that or would cause me to do that, I'm stiff arming. I'm giving it the Heisman Trophy, move. But a lot of people don't prepare for that. They don't.
I heard somebody talking about, I don't know if it was talking about addiction or, bad choices, and they were explaining it as somebody that's holding a snake. And once the awareness gets to a certain level and you realize that you're holding a snake and you see it and you understand that it's going to bite you and there's poison, you're going to throw it away. You're going to throw it away as far away from you as possible. But as long as you're not fully aware of how it can bite you and the poison, you'll continue to hold it and you'll do whatever it is. And so I feel like addiction is holding the snake, and it's us, whether it's by use of avoidance or I don't know what other defensiveness or whatever. It's like our mind tricks us into believing that snake isn't going to bite us. And so I feel like what your job is to get the person to the level of awareness where it's like they for themselves understand that this snake is going to bite, so they can throw it away. And just like you, once you understood and once you had the awareness and it was at the level where you're like, whoa, then it was like right away. It wasn't I have to go to therapy. It was like, I'm done. And I feel like that happens a lot, even like people that smoke cigarettes. They try the nicotine patch and then they try to stop smoking so much. But everybody I personally know that has actually quit smoking, it hasn't been from a nicotine patch. It hasn't been from a prescription. It hasn't been from limiting themselves. You know what it's from? Them saying, I'm done. And they throw it away. And I've seen people 30 years and cold turkey, and they are still not smoking. And so I don't know.
That is so true. That is 100% true. And sometimes there's a little preparation or, getting a person up to that point, because there's no way in this for me. And I always look at it, this is what it was for me. What it's going to be for you or somebody else, that's not for me to decide. That's going to be your situation. That's you doing it, not me. I could say this, and I get into this thing where people go, oh, well, this is what you need to do, and this is what you should do. About no, I all I could do is maybe give you some things that you can then use that maybe help yourself get in a better position, because the truth is it's 100% you doing whatever, however this turns out, it's 100% you. It's not, I can help you, but it's going to be you, and so, but I go along with the fact that we're getting a person up to that decision, right, where they can then make that decision is a little bit of a process, because there's no way I would have been able to make that decision had I not been forced into a scenario that caused me to kind of improve things, just kind of change things where I was continually improve. Then I could go, oh yeah, okay. So that's like, it's like this big duh, like no, like what the, like it's almost, you pulled your head out for a minute and you're looking, oh, okay.
Now I see.
Like, but yeah, I mean, look at that as a snake until you realize, what do you expect? It's a snake. You're holding a snake, so why would you be surprised that it bit you? It's a snake. That's what the snakes do. So
very true. So then that leads me to the next kind of level, where you have pharmaceutical companies that are producing, and they know full damn well the side effects, just like the smoking companies. They understand, and then there's a certain period of time where they're like, no, we don't, this doesn't hurt you, and then they already knew, and then it's like they found out that we knew, and so, well, okay, I guess there's some issues, but until then, we're gonna make as much money as possible. And I feel like there's a lot of prescription drugs that are pushed by pharmaceutical companies through the doctors, writing the scripts. And at what point are they supposed to be held liable for doing what they're doing? And is it ever going to happen, because they own all of the politicians, and so we don't have any way of fighting that, I guess? Or how have you come across situations where you've seen it could have been mitigated had a pharmaceutical company had a little bit, maybe not push their product so much, or a doctor that could have, not prescribed that? Do you come across that often?
Yeah, I mean, constantly. It's the biggest problem. I mean, Purdue Pharma. Have you heard of that situation, Purdue Pharma, where they Sackler family? They were the Purdue Pharma, is the one that came out with OxyContin.
Oh, right.
26 Purdue Pharma. They've got, well, they're out of business. They're out because they have a class action lawsuit going on right now with maybe it was been determined anyway, but they were false advertising, misleading and they had a whole machine going on. I mean, there's a lot of documentaries out there. I've got a book right here called Pharma.
Wow, that's a big book.
This is a guy who's like, yeah, it's called Pharma. And to answer your question, read that book. And it's all about the misleading practices of people that are, they're basically legal drug dealers. That's what they are. Now, some people have integrity. Some people have, like when I had knee surgery in 1993, and I went in and I had some bone spurs taken off my knee.
Ouch.
And I was in a cast from my mid thigh all the way down to my ankle. I was going to be in it for 6 weeks, and the doctor gave me 3 days supply of Vortab. Wow. And he said, "Now you come back in 3 days, and I'll give you 3 more days." But so I went back in 3 days, and I asked for 3 more days, and I said, "No, I don't understand. This is kind of sadistic that you're not giving me. Like, I'm going to be in this cast for 6 weeks." He said, "I am not going to be responsible for your." He was the orthopedic surgeon for the Oklahoma University football team, so he was used to dealing with people, and he said, "I'm not going to be responsible for your pain pill addiction."
Hey, you know what? That's an interesting way of doing that. I haven't heard of doctors doing it that way, but what a great idea. Well,
and I look back at that, and he looks at me, and he's not a very big guy. He's a small guy, but he's like, he said, "I know you think you're a tough guy, so you're just gonna have to tough it out, dude." And I was like,
that's the tough love you don't want to hear, though.
I was mad at him, but I thought, man, I called him all kinds of names. But then I look back and I thought, man, that was an awesome thing that he did, because I didn't really have a desire for pain pills anyway. I mean, I like to go the other way, but
more methamphetamine, like get pumped up and
get the heart rate up. But but I look back at that moment, I wasn't doing anything that he's told me to do either. Stay off of it. Don't drink a lot, take a lot of sugar, do this. And so the swelling wouldn't be so bad. I wasn't doing any of that. I was drinking alcohol. I was running around, on it all the time. I was causing the pain to be worse because I wasn't following the doctor's orders. So here I was wanting him to give me drugs, but also at the same time wasn't doing what I was supposed to be doing to reduce the pain. So, I'm thinking that's just a classic example of, myself doing this, the very thing that I see people doing now. And it's usually from an educated, a lot of people that I deal with they just don't know, so anyway.
So, and then you've touched on fentanyl. You've mentioned that a couple times. And I know right now that's a big issue in our homeland. And how often are you seeing that compared to heroin, compared to coke, compared to meth, compared to Molly, compared, all of the smorgasbord of recreational drugs?
I say it's pretty common. I mean, it's especially if they're buying pills off the street. They've got the pills now that look exactly like they came from a pharmaceutical company that are coming off the street. They're coming from the labs in Mexico. So matter of fact, the kid in Colorado that his mother caught him with the 50 pills, and they looked at him and his mom took a picture of them, and they looked them up online, and yes, they were legitimate forms of the pill, but by the way, we're also finding these from that's coming from Mexico, and they're
cut in it and that cut in it.
Yeah, there's this fentanyl in it, so it's pretty prevalent. It's out there, it's they're putting it in. They're putting it in cocaine, so the likelihood you're going to be exposed to it if you're buying drugs off the street, which even if you're buying them not off the street, there's a high chance you're going to be exposed.
They're putting fentanyl in cocaine.
Yeah, they're doing it. I don't even understand that. I don't guess it's for the numbing effect or something. I don't know. So, but it's so I don't understand it, but it's I've been told that it's happening.
Would you say that overall as a society that we have more people addicted now or back then? Do you think it's getting progressively worse, or do you think we're getting better?
It's progressively getting worse. I mean, it is. I mean, it's not getting better. I mean, and especially with, and I'm not going to get into the argument over marijuana, but, people talk about marijuana being a gateway drug or, there's all kinds of arguments of marijuana. And I can throw in with people as far as, it not being as bad as alcohol maybe, but I wouldn't use alcohol as an argument because alcohol kills about 500,000 people a year. So that should be it's not as good as, I'm glad it's not as bad as alcohol. So, so I would say that, people need to be better educated about what drugs do and how they affect the body, because particularly I've seen more kids today that are smoking weed are only testing positive for weed. I'm going to say that. And they're literally going psychotic. I'm not joking. I mean, going into psych wards, and it's because of either the potency of the marijuana, of the THC, or the chemicals that are sprayed on it, or they could possibly be mixing it with synthetics. And people might argue with me that, it's probably they're mixed it with synthetics. I don't have any evidence that they're not.
When you say synthetics, what do you mean?
Like spice or K2 or something of that nature, stuff that's coming from China that they can, they make it, it's supposed to be a synthetic marijuana. So different spice type drugs. That's what I mean by synthetics. But I don't, the thing of it is that the potency in marijuana, when I used to smoke it, was about 3%. And upon occasion, I wasn't testing it. There was a couple of times that I smoked it that it really kind of took me out there. It was like, you're out there, you're like, and I accused a friend of mine of spraying something on it, putting, they called it wet at the time. I don't know if it was, anyway. But anyway, I accused a friend of mine and he denies it. Years later, he denied it. I hit him up about it. I said, remember that time? And, and he said, yeah, I don't remember doing anything like that. Cause, but today's potency of marijuana is so, like, particularly when they're pulling they have a thing they do called shatter, which they pull the THC out of the plant and they make it into an oil, and it's like 95 to 90, maybe even 100% THC, and they make it into an oil, and they're smoking it. It's so, THC is, it's a psychoactive drug, meaning psycho meaning affects the brain, active meaning it's going to affect the brain. So when you go from 3% to now, at least when you buy it out of these dispensaries, I think it's probably a 35 to 40% pure if you're smoking it. The oil is about almost 100% pure THC.
Wow.
So it's going to be, and there was a professor years ago that I have a friend of mine that worked for the DEA out in California. And he had a friend that was a professor that said, if the THC levels continue to go up as they are, you're going to see people going psychotic on marijuana alone.
Okay, so my personal experience, I have a hard time sleeping. And I went to one of these dispensaries and I was talking to them about, I can't sleep, help me, CBD or whatever. Is there something? And the guy was saying, actually, we have something perfect for you. We have this oil. It's THC. So exactly, I think what you're talking about. I don't know the efficacy of it. Pretty sure it's up there. But he said, okay. And I was telling him, I don't have a problem going to sleep. It's when I wake up at 2, 3 o'clock in the morning and then my mind starts going brrr, and then I can't go back to sleep. He said, well, if you try this oil, put a couple drops in your, under your tongue or whatever it is, and it'll probably take about 45 minutes to take effect. In the meantime, you can fall asleep, but then you're asleep and that's when it's going to get you, right? And then it'll kind of put you in a, not necessarily comatose, but, this state, and you won't wake up. And I was like, you know what? I'll try it because I'm trying to do anything I can to get better sleep. Yeah. So I took it, fell asleep, nothing. I woke up, I think it was like 2 o'clock in the morning. It could have been 2:30, I'm not sure. And there it goes. And then I realized that I had taken that stuff on top of it. And so not only was I in my normal zone, but now it was in a place in my mind where I couldn't control what was happening to me. And then I started freaking out a little bit. I got paranoid, and then that led to going, okay, I got to get up and I got to move. So I got up and I'm walking back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And my mind, I just, I was jumping to these negative thoughts and I couldn't stop it. And then it was just progressing like to the worst negative thought to a worse negative thought. And so, and it got to a point where my wife woke up and she's like, are you okay? And I'm like, no, I'm not okay. I'm not okay. And then, it was a really bad scenario. Yeah. And so for me, I'm very sensitive to that, I guess. And so, psychoactive, holy crap. Like, it was very psychoactive for me, and in not a good way. Not everybody has that same effect, but it was like that for me. So I can't do that. And I can see how over time, if people are ingesting too much of it, that you would have some side effects. Now, I'm sure everybody's different, but that could be a concern.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to. I have friends of mine or people I went to high school with that it's so funny. Oklahoma just passed. I live in Kansas City now, but Oklahoma just passed the medical marijuana, and I think those guys. I'm born and bred Okie, right?
Uh-huh.
Those guys are like going nuts down there. They've gone crazy. They've lost their damn mind. I mean, there's a dispensary on literally every corner. I mean, it's like, and there's more. I think there's more dispensaries in Oklahoma than there are in Colorado.
Wow, and Colorado's been doing it for a while.
Yeah. I mean, I don't.
Well, I can tell you. I think I have an educated guess on why that is, because you have people that have gotten to the dispensary business over here, and then they're looking for other opportunities, right? And so when a new thing pops up on the map, you don't just have the people that live there. You have the people that have been in the business over here going over there as well. So that would make sense.
That is true, definitely true. And my dad, which is still lives right there in the little town of where I grew up, and my sister, they're Chinese are buying up land around there like crazy. Start growing wheat. And so I don't know what all is to that, but yeah, you're right. People are, that are already had their setup, their situate, are moving to the new opportunity to cover, cover more area. And then more and more people are coming out of the woodwork that now showing up at the Baptist church and I got my card.
Yeah. Well, but see, here's the thing.
That's still marijuana.
But here's the thing. When you're looking at the pharmaceutical companies, right, that are producing this, and they're, they have all the side effects because when you're ingesting that and you have the, I can't remember. So every time you take a pill, there's a portion of that pill that just kills your liver. I can't remember what. My mind's blanking out on me right now, but there are bad things associated with taking a lot of prescription drugs, and then you have people that are taking those prescription drugs and taking 7 different prescription drugs to alleviate the issues that they're having, and then they try to start doing some cannabis or some smoking some weed, and for whatever reason that alleviates those issues. And it's like, well, do I want to take these prescription drugs that are legal? Now, me understanding legal, what I think is they're legal because the pharmaceutical companies own the legislators, because they're the ones that are giving them the campaign funds. And it's only legal because they've written it into law, given it to the legislators that owe them because of their campaign donations. And that's why it's legal. It's not because of any other reason. And so I'm looking at it like, okay, this person could be taking, all these prescription drugs and then having all of those bad side effects, or not. And now they smoke a doobie and they like some ice cream. So to me, I think it's, but again, it's the moderation, and the excess is bad for anyone. So where do you draw the line, and how do you draw the line? I don't know.
That's a great. I mean, my my wife's stepdad just got diagnosed with stage 4 cancer, and he's going, and they my mother-in-law, they think there's a pretty good chance of recovery. But I don't know if I were him, that I wouldn't be firing one up. Going to be in a lot of pain. I don't know that I wouldn't say to him, Terry, don't, I'd be like, maybe you should go down there to the dispensary and talk to those guys down there. I mean, because you don't want your loved ones in, but you look at it like there is a line that, I have a friend, that's a nurse, and she didn't believe. This was about, I don't know, 6 or 7 years ago. I was quite surprised by this because I had been in Hawaii for years, and then I moved back to Oklahoma. And I was posting something on Facebook about the pharmaceutical, the opiate pain, the crisis that's going on. And, and I was giving statistics on, Facebook, and she comes on and she's kind of contesting me about, because she works with terminally ill patients that are, got cancer or whatever. They're and she's having to dispense these meds. And so she's giving them out the Oxycontin and the things that, people are dying from. And so I had to point out article after article all over the country. I just said, oh, by the way, here's an article from New York. Here's one from California. Here's one from Florida. Here's one from I basically pulled articles that talked about the problem from all over the country and put them on there. And I said, look, and then she says, well, what do I tell these people that are terminally ill? I mean, and I said, to be honest with you, I'd probably just give them their medication, and it wouldn't even, because what are you going to do for these guys? I mean, it's good. But at the same time, I had a friend of mine that's, to kind of answer your question here. I had a friend of mine that when I lived with, he was in the military. He was a recruiter for the military. And on the weekends, he would tie one on, boy. He was my neighbor. And he'd have barbecue, friends over, and he would want to play cards. And he was from back east, up in New Jersey, Philadelphia area. And anyway, he would just, but they had a little girl, little 3 or 4 year old little girl. The wife would stay sober. He would definitely have too much to drink. And he asked me one time, he said, do you think I have he knew I was a counselor, and I would go over there and hang out with him, but I didn't drink it. But we'd go over and have fun. And then, he asked me, he said, do you think I have an alcohol problem? I said, well, when you put, your wife and your kids and your career and everything else that matters in this hand, and you put the alcohol in this hand, and you choose the alcohol, then guess what? There's a problem. If you're doing, and that line could be crossed. Most people cross the line and they don't know the line's been crossed. That particular guy just bought a house up in the Poconos. His summer, he's retired now he got out of the military. He's in there for 20 years. He went on to get his master's degree, and then he went on. Now he's got a house in the Poconos. So we like to tell people, we got friends that have a house, a summer home in the Poconos. But he was definitely career oriented. He definitely was all about his family, so for him, those were the most important things. The alcohol was not, it was, he liked to drink, but it wasn't the most important thing. And so when those things become the most important thing over everything else, and that's when, you really got to step back. And again, that line gets crossed, and usually it's miles behind you before you realize, wait a minute, I've crossed the line. So
that slippery slope you're already sliding in when you realize it.
Exactly.
So what about when it comes to psychedelics? I know that there are a lot of research studies that have linked LSD as a successful modal therapy for people that have depression. And instead of taking Zoloft and a lot of different prescription drugs, they've, as a everyday thing, they've used psilocybin, and they've used LSD, and they've used different psychedelics, and have had people come out of recovery or basically are, I guess, I don't know if healed is the right word, fixed just with 1 or 2 treatments, as opposed to, have you come across any situations of that?
I've heard of it, and and this is what I always tell people, look, if people are dialing my number, things aren't well, right? So I only hear about the cases that didn't go well. I don't, so you know what I mean? So it's a little bit like a skewed, I'm not, people aren't, oh yeah, they're not going to call me up to tell me, oh yeah, but they may call me and say, well, he went to this one program and they put him into a coma for 3 days, and then he did this certain drug, and then that lasted for about 18 months. Right. Okay. Well, that's great. I said, so, but where are we at now? Where is it at now? We want to put something together. So I can't, I would never tell somebody, if that's what worked for you, that you shouldn't do it. Right. I particularly, from a physiological standpoint, I could see where it wouldn't work, but I'm not here to I wouldn't get into an argument with somebody, and I just wouldn't do that. If they're able to lead a saner lifestyle, I do what I do because I want to make it as safe as possible for my family and for other people's families, where I can worry less about if I'm driving down the road, whether I'm going to get hit by somebody high on drugs or whatever. I mean, so if I can make it saner, then that's what I'm after. So I'm not going to argue with somebody about, the ineffectiveness of that. I don't have any, and particularly I don't have any science, something that says, differently in front of me. So, but I can tell you that from that type of thing, just to give you something to think about. I know a lot of people have been hypnotized from, and taking those type of drugs is a form of hypnotism. It's a chemical type of hypnotism. If you could, you can see what I'm saying. I mean, you're leaving the conscious state and then entering in suggestions that would influence your ability, you know, like people have been hypnotized to stop smoking cigarettes. Now, I'm not a fan of hypnotism at all, because I firmly believe that you can enter in something good in there, but you could also enter in something bad.
Yeah, not on purpose.
Not on purpose, right? So it's just like in high school when we had a hypnotist come to our school, and they would, you know, they hypnotized the girl and said, now you're going to go out in the audience, and when I say this word, you're going to jump up and yell, scream a thing. And we're all thinking, yeah, whatever. And then he, you know, I forgot all about it. The girl goes back out in the audience, and then about towards the end of the presentation, he says the word, and she jumps up and screams and everybody's laughing at her. It was like embarrassing for her. She wouldn't have done that willingly. I mean, she wasn't that type of person. Yeah. So I'm thinking in my mind, well, was that a good thing or a bad thing? I mean, yeah, we all got a kick out of it, but those type of things entered into, you know, so I think you get the idea. So,
you know, I got hypnotized one time at this bar, and ended up taking my shirt off, put a wig on, and I was sitting on somebody's lap. It was so, now these are not things I would normally do now. Yeah. But I was having fun, and when you're in that state, you are open to suggestions. And, you know, I look back and I think there's a picture floating around of me in a wig and, you know, singing. I was like some kind of singer or something. I don't know, but probably pretty damn embarrassing. But it just goes to enforce that point of, when, you know, the power of suggestion is pretty damn powerful.
Yeah, exactly. And I would have, you know, you look at, there's chemical, you know, the people that do things are, well, I would call it tequila. Back in the day, we used to say good old tequila. It puts dents in your car and knots on your head.
That's funny.
Come home and I got all these knots on my head. I got dents in my car. Oh yeah, I was drinking tequila last night. How'd that happen?
So you're out in Kansas City.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay. So it's a couple hours past the time over. So we're in California. You're 2 hours later over there.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, I don't want to take too much more of your time up, but I think that we had a very productive conversation. I think you have a lot of insight. I think I would like to sit down with you again and talk more about specific stories of interventions, because I bet that'd be some real colorful content.
I've got a few. I've got actually quite a few that are very I don't know, people. I have a friend of mine that says, you've got to start writing these things down, and you've got to, you know, you've got to write a book, and you've got to tell these stories. And, you know, I've had, you know, I want to tell you a story real quick, a success story about a guy he was a first generation. I don't know if it's just me or, you know, I guess a lot of people, but I've had the pleasure of working with a lot of first generation immigrants into our country. Like I'm talking from all, like Cambodia, from Vietnam, from Korea to, you know, India, Lebanon, Israel. One of the prettiest young women I've ever seen in my life was from Iran, right? Persian. It was like, you know, the girl that goes around, you know, in the Aladdin movie. Oh, yeah. So I was 22 years old, but, you know, I'm a happily married guy, so don't get any wrong ideas. But, you know, I'm just saying that. And then this Iraq, I have a family from Iraq, Czechoslovakia, Russia, Ukraine. And there's similarities amongst all these people. They're very hardworking. I'm not, you know, these are first generation immigrants that are here. You know, they're working hard. They're citizens.
Well, they got here somehow. I'm sure it wasn't easy. They probably had to. Just the fact they're here speaks volumes.
Yeah, they come from their situation to another country, and they're working. And but anyway, this particular family was from Iraq. And this guy had been to rehab like 3 times. And I walk into his room and you can't take a step in his room without stepping on a syringe.
Oh,
That's
wow.
how it is. And it was kind of like, we're in there, and his mother was a single mom, and which is another common factor that I see a lot. And, this is her baby, her youngest son, and he's got a problem. The oldest boy was, successful, hardworking guy, had a job, supporting his family. And this guy, anyway, we went in. It took us about a day, but, we were in there, and I was talking to him, and he finally got up to my face and he says, "Look, if I go to rehab," he said, "and I come out and I OD, it's because he always would OD when he'd come out of rehab." And I said, and he's like, "If I OD and I die, blood is going to be on your hands." And I said, "Dude," I said, "let me just let you in on a secret." I said, "You go to rehab and you come out, you put a needle in your arm and you OD and you die. That's your fault. It's not going to be mine. I'm trying to get you to live. So you're not trying to put that, there was a lot of profanity in there, but you're not putting that on me. I'm trying to get you to live." And I just walked out the door, and he was standing there with his mouth open, like nobody had ever shoved it in his face like that. You keep putting it off on like it's your mom and it's your brother and this and that. I mean, no, we're not doing it. But he actually took him into a program. We got his agreement to go. And he and I flew all night across the country, and he went into a program, was there for a little over, it was a place that he liked to be, right? It was a nice place. And his mother sent me a text about 2 weeks ago, said he'd been sober for 6 months, his first time in his life, that she could remember that he'd been sober for 6 months. So, awesome. But he was, I thought this guy had, his legs he was shooting up in his legs, and it was just like constant sores. I mean, he had bandages from his knees down to his ankles, and they were just soaked. He had to change his bandages every 2 or 3 hours because they would soak with, it just wasn't a pretty scene, but it was bad. And that's how bad he was. And, but we got him sober, and he was, over the hump and happy. So, and there's a lot of stories like that, but that one was one I was particularly proud of because, there was not a lot of what we call leverage in the intervention industry. You have leverage over somebody. It'd be like consequences of them saying no. Like if you refuse to get help, then, we're going to pull all support, or we're going to have you evicted from the house, or we're going to have some sort of leverage over you to get you to, what we call the pressure to get them to go. There wasn't a lot there. But he agreed, he definitely wanted to change, and he did make the change. So, but I have a lot of other very funny stories and interesting stories, but definitely like to talk to you again for sure.
Cool. Well, so I think the overarching message of this podcast is that if you're out there, if you think you're struggling with addiction, you think it's possible, help is out there, but at the end of the day, it's on you. It's on you. You have to take personal responsibility. If you do not take personal responsibility, it's only going to get worse. And if you say that you don't have a problem, maybe you don't have a problem. But take a step outside of yourself and look at your situation. And if your priority comes down to taking a drug or doing a thing, as opposed to something that is beneficial and will help you, then that is a chief indicator that you have a problem. And if you can see that and make that connection, help is out there. Help in the form of Bobby Newman. Bobby, how would somebody come out? Would they come out to you and visit you in person? Would they call you? Is it an email? What contact information do you have?
You could call me at, my number is 866-989-4499. I have people that answer my hotline. The girl that answers my hotline actually got me into rehab over 20 years ago. So we've been doing this a long time.
Wow.
Yeah. And she's got her own very interesting story. She's quite the character, but she definitely is very good at helping people. And then you can my website is newmaninterventions.com. at NEWMAN interventions with an S.com, newmaninterventions.com. You can go there. There's a lot of information on interventions there. I also have newmaninterventions.com/25 successful intervention tips. Okay. So it's, and I can send in 25 successful intervention tips. There's a form on there. You can fill that out. You can download 25 tips for a successful intervention. It's a free and it's designed for families to learn, if they have a loved one, to learn more about what it takes to do an intervention on someone, right? And you basically prepare everything before you ever get in front of the person. You have a lot of preparation that goes in before you ever present talking to someone about their problem and trying to do so. You have it laid out to the degree that all you have to do is get them to say yes, and then everything else is handled. And so you can download that off my website, and then or give us a call. We'll be glad to help you any way that we can. So,
how about Facebook or Instagram or Twitter? Do you do any of those social media?
I'm on all of that. If you just put in Newman Intervention Services, I'm gonna come up on Google, and I'm gonna come up on Facebook. So,
I like the fact that your last name is Newman.
A lot of people have said that. They're like, Newman, a new man.
So if you have a problem and you want to be a new man, then call Mr. Newman. Bobby, you're awesome. Thank you so much for your time, for your talent, for your information and insight. And until the next time, for all of you boys and girls out there in podcast land, thank you again from the bottom of my heart and tuning in. And we'll see you around the corner.